Hello, and welcome to Coca's Home for the Holidays. Today we will be making entrees, Wellingtons, beef or vegetarian, and a side dish of Brussels sprouts. I can't wait to get started with you. We have a whole lot of ingredients out today because we will be combining both Wellingtons depending on if you are doing the beef Wellington or if you're doing the vegetable Wellington. So follow along with me, although there will be times when I'm speaking about the vegetable and not the beef or vice versa, but I promise to be as clear as possible. Let's get started. The first thing that we will be doing is making a mushroom duxelle. And once again, it's that fancy French word that actually only means mushrooms that have been reduced in white wine. But there is a little bit of technique today, so I think that it's an important teaching moment for everyone. You're going to take your cremini mushrooms or baby portobellos, and your portion will be smaller because I am making for both Wellingtons. Make sure that your mushrooms are rinsed, and then go ahead and just chop them in half or in thirds if the mushrooms are bigger. And we're going to add them to a food processor. If you don't have a food processor at home, you can simply mince them into smaller mushrooms. It might take a little longer, but you're still going to get the exact same effect. Great. Once your mushrooms are chopped, go ahead and pop them into your food processor. Pulse them for about 10 seconds or so and check them. You want to make sure that they're all uniform and in pretty small pieces. A nice uniform mince. If you need to, go ahead and get in there and kind of lift some of the mushrooms out so that they can all chop. Awesome. Once your mushrooms are ready, then you're going to grab a cotton dish towel. Now, if you don't have a cotton dish towel at home and you have a nut bag or cheesecloth or even just paper towels, you can certainly use those as well. We're going to spread them out. And if there are any big chunks of mushrooms left in here, you can always pull them out and you can mince them yourself, or you can just pull them out. It's not that big of a deal. You're going to dump the mushrooms onto a towel and pretty much squeeze them within an inch of their life. Now, don't be shy. You're going to put them in a little pocket like this, making sure that none of them are going to come out. Twist the top and squeeze. And if you can see, I mean, look at all this liquid that is coming out. You wouldn't think that mushrooms could actually have this much liquid in them, but they can. And why we're doing this is because mushrooms have so much liquid. If we add white wine to it and then we reduce it, they're never going to reduce into the thick paste that we want for the Wellingtons. So this way, we are adding a little bit more liquid with the white wine, but we are allowing it to be a mushroom paste. And go ahead and kind of manhandle your mushrooms. It's all right, they're mushrooms. It's going to be a beautiful paste. Don't be afraid. And ever so often, you can kind of open up the mushroom cloth and spread them out a little bit. Go back, twist it up, and squeeze again. When you're finished, there should be a good amount of mushroom liquid that you have squeezed out. And the mushrooms themselves should be almost like ground beef in texture. They're really, really thick. They're really, really dry. Great. Once we've squeezed out our cremini mushrooms, you can go ahead and set them aside and get your shallot ready for a nice mince. Now, the best way that I cut shallots is you want to cut off that top part and then you want to cut it in half. Then it pretty much is like chopping a mushroom. And for mince, it's always a good idea that you take the shallot and you go ahead and slice it in half first, almost to that end that's still there. Then give it a lengthwise cut, and then you can go in and it minces really, really easily. Once your shallot is minced, we're going to go ahead and add everything to the skillet. So in your skillet, you're going to melt a tablespoon of butter. Once the butter is melted, you want to turn the heat up to about medium or medium high and go ahead and add in your mushrooms. Your shallots, a sprig or two of thyme. It's up to you for taste preference. A pinch of salt and a pinch of black pepper. And then we're going to go ahead and let these cook down about 5 minutes or so. The mushrooms should start browning. You'll keep stirring them and you will definitely be able to tell the aromatics. Once the shallots begin to turn translucent, now is the time where you add your 3 tablespoons of white wine. This will sizzle and sputter, don't be afraid. And we're just going to cook it down. Once the mushrooms are nice and browned and the onions are a little crisp and sizzly and the whole mixture is much drier, you can go ahead and pull it from the heat and set it aside. Now would be a great time to hit pause and clean up a little bit. And if you didn't remember to preheat your oven, now would be a wonderful time to do that as well. Beef Wellington at 425 and vegetable Wellington at 400. For the vegetable Wellington, heat your pan on medium to medium high heat, put in a tablespoon of butter and melt it. Once the butter is melted, add 1 cup of butternut squash in one even layer over medium heat. Let that sit for about 4 minutes. Once the butternut squash has been cooking for 4 minutes flat in the pan, now is the time to stir it. You will see some really great caramelization on the pieces. Give it a good stir, put it back in over the heat, and cook for about another 7 to 10 minutes, stirring ever so often to make sure that it's caramelized on all sides. After the butternut squash has cooked for that additional 7 to 10 minutes and the squash has a beautiful caramelization on all sides, you're going to add a tablespoon of syrup, a pinch of salt, and about 1/8 of a teaspoon of smoked paprika, and 1 sprig of fresh thyme. Give it a little stir. Reduce the heat to low and cook for 1 more minute. Welcome back. Now it's time to sear the beef. You will need a tablespoon of butter in a skillet. Then take your tenderloin and cut it in half into 2 pieces. Turn your pan to medium-high heat to go ahead and melt that butter. Once the butter is almost smoking, it's time to add your beef. When the butter is nearly smoking, swirl it in the pan and get ready to add your beef. Turning the heat up to about medium-high. You should hear a good sizzle on the meat. You want to pay attention this entire time. Do not step away. We're going to brown each side for about a minute or 2 so that there's a nice browning on each side of the beef. Now this is searing the beef. This doesn't mean that we're actually cooking the beef. We're just getting a good browning on each side to add flavor and to keep in, almost like a vacuum, to keep in the moisture of the beef while it's cooking. And this is what we're looking for, a really amazing browning. Come on, friend, you can do it. I believe in you. Once all of the sides of the meat have been browned, turn off the stove and set aside. Welcome back. Now it's time to assemble the beef for the beef Wellington. You want to take your prosciutto, there should be 6 pieces, and shingle them, layering them slightly so that they're just about the width to hold the piece of beef. Once you've done that, you go ahead and grab your beef and set it on top of the prosciutto. Then you're going to take your Dijon mustard and smear all sides of the beef with it. Next, you'll take about a teaspoon of parsley and just kind of rip it in your hands. and set it on your beef. The last thing you'll do is you're going to top it with your mushrooms. It's really awesome. It's such a beautiful layering of flavor that we're getting between the freshness of the parsley and the tang of the mustard and the mushrooms that have a little bit of wine in them. They're deep and they're earthy, but they're going really nicely with everything else. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't be afraid to use your hands. From here, just sort of make sure that all the mushrooms are tucked in. And that's why we're also using the Dijon. The Dijon is sort of like the glue that holds everything together. From here, you're going to take all of the sides of the prosciutto and sort of make a little pocket. Kind of squeeze it together and then place it seam side down on a plate. Do the same thing for the other one. Kind of squeeze it together. Seam side down on a plate. And then you want to go ahead and pop this in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes to recongeal everything and chill it. Welcome back. Now we're ready to assemble our vegetable Wellington. You're going to take your puff pastry, and I hope that it has been chilling in your fridge this whole entire time and not in your freezer. If it hasn't, you can go ahead and pause this video and make sure to bring it at least to refrigerator temperature. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to work with it very well. Spread it out either on parchment or a lightly floured surface. From here, we're going to add our butternut squash in about the 3/4 portion of the puff pastry, not exactly in half. And spread it into a thin layer, but really making sure, because we're going to fold this over and crimp all the sides, that you're really working in a smaller space on that 3/4 side of the pastry. Once you've added your mushrooms, get ready to top it with parsley. However, if you don't care for mushrooms or you have an allergy, a very easy substitution is to use eggplant. You can prepare the eggplant exactly how you prepared the mushrooms. Next, you're going to take about a teaspoon to a tablespoon, depending on your preference, of parsley. Go ahead and just break it up by hand. Add a nice crack of pepper and top with your mushrooms. Once again, working in that small space, you might need to sort of make sure that everything is in that way. You can press down slightly, that helps keep it. Then you're going to take your goat cheese and you're going to spoon it over the mushrooms. This will get melty and magnificent. And I always say, if there's ever a time to use cheese, if you use goat cheese, it usually makes it even better. We're now going to prepare a simple egg wash. Take an egg and crack it. Give it a light whisk. Then add a little water to it, about a tablespoon or so. The reason why we make an egg wash is it is twofold. It's a glue to hold the pastry together so that it's a seamed pocket that doesn't just have a lot of holes and it keeps a lot of the moisture in, but it also makes everything a little golden, a little shiny, a little crisper looking. So it actually adds to the aesthetic of the Wellington very easily. Then you'll need a pastry brush or a silicone spatula or even a back of a spoon. It can be any of those. Great. Once you have your egg wash prepared, it's time to assemble. You'll need about an inch border on all sides. Go ahead and brush that first half of the pastry surrounding the insides. Then take the other half and very carefully lift it over, matching seam to seam, giving it a slight press to activate that egg wash glue. From here, you'll gently pat down the insides. And then you'll gently roll your puff pastry to meet those covered insides. Puff pastry is one of my favorite things to work with because it looks like you've put in so much effort, but it really is just store-bought puff pastry that puffs beautifully, cooks lovely. You can manipulate it in so many ways. I highly recommend you trying it out. From here, you should have a pocket, and then you're going to take a fork and you're going to gently score all of those rolled bits into a lovely pattern. Almost like a pie crust. Great. From there, you're just going to take the egg wash and you're going to brush the entire top of this vegetable Wellington. And like I said, it will make it just this golden, beautiful, glistening top that will just really elevate the whole look of it. And you want it to be a very thin layer as well. Beautiful. Then we're going to transfer it to a parchment-lined baking sheet and pop it in the oven. Once you have your vegetable Wellington on a lined parchment baking sheet, you're going to pop it in the oven at 400. We'll go ahead and check on it in about 20 to 25 minutes. Hi, welcome back. Now it's time to assemble the beef Wellington. You'll take your puff pastry and put it on a lightly floured surface. And believe me, that flouring is very important. It helps it not stick when you get ready to roll everything together. Next, you'll dust the top of the pastry, the puff pastry, with a little more flour just to make sure that it doesn't stick when you roll it out. From there, we're going to gently roll in all directions. And we want the puff pastry to just be a little bit bigger so that we can cut it in half and form the two separate beef Wellingtons. Once you have a piece that's about big enough eyesight-wise to do 2 of the Wellingtons, you're going to go ahead and cut the puff pastry in half. Next, we're going to take our refrigerated prosciutto wrapped Wellingtons and put them on the puff pastry. From here, we're going to use an egg wash. And if you were watching the vegetable Wellington section, you know how to do the egg wash. An egg wash is basically a whisked egg and about a teaspoon to a tablespoon of water. The egg wash really is the glue that helps keep everything together, and it's very, very important. Actually going to move the Wellingtons down to that lower 3/4 of the puff pastry. And then about 1.5 inches to 1 inch seam on that side, only going up to about where the Wellington is sitting. You're going to brush your pastry. Very lightly, you don't need a ton of it. And if you're really picky about the aesthetic, if you didn't roll things out completely perfect, now's the time to take your knife and trim to make some nice straight lines. Next, you're going to take the second half of the pastry, stretch it, pull it over, and seal it down on all the edges. It's sort of like a huge ravioli. And the awesome thing about puff pastry is it's really forgiving. If perhaps you do tear a hole in it, just go ahead and take that extra puff pastry, pinch it in, put a little egg wash on there, and pop it back on. You do want to seal. Next, we're going to just gently roll the edges . So that you're making this really beautiful pocket. And do it for the other one. Next, take your fork. Crimp the edges with your fork, much like what you would do to a pie crust. This helps seal it, but then it also helps make it look really lovely. Now's the time too, if you notice that you missed an edge or there's perhaps some prosciutto tucking out, tuck it back in and roll it back up. You want a nice good seal on this. Great. From here, it is very important that you take your fork, and I like to do an X, and just make a tiny little steam pocket in the top part of this Wellington. Then you're going to take your egg wash and lightly wash the entire Wellington. This egg wash really does make everything turn so golden brown and beautiful. It really elevates the look of it. It also makes it look like you worked really hard on some pastry, when really all you did was brush it with some egg. Once you've done that, go ahead and grab a cookie sheet lined with parchment paper or greased aluminum foil and transfer your Wellingtons onto it. Once you've transferred your Wellingtons to a parchment-lined baking sheet, it's time to put it in the oven at 425 degrees. Go ahead and set a timer for about 20 minutes. We'll check on it then. Welcome back. Now I'm going to show you a quick side to make to go with your Wellingtons. And for those of you who maybe aren't on the Brussels sprout train, I promise you this is a simple, easy way to get even the Brussels sprout hater in your life to get on board with Brussels sprouts. You're going to need about a pound of Brussels sprouts, a lemon, a clove of garlic, some Parmesan cheese, balsamic vinegar, olive oil, and salt and pepper. It really is very simple. And I have to be honest, this side dish I make with my family probably every week. We are Brussels sprout heads, and this comes together so quick and easy, there's no reason that you can't add a little green to your diet during the weeknight. So let's get started. First, you want to rinse your Brussels sprouts. Then, if any of your Brussels sprouts have any kind of mangled, sad leaves, go ahead and take them off and set them to the side. Then you want to lightly trim the bottoms of your Brussels sprouts. Once you have all of the ends picked off of your Brussels sprouts, you can do one of two things. If you have a food processor at home, you can go ahead and set the attachment for shred on your food processor and just pop them in, and it makes it go very quickly. Otherwise, you can shred them by hand. And all you have to do is cut very, very thin strips of the Brussels sprout itself and pop it on the pan. Once you have your Brussels sprouts chopped, go ahead and break them apart with your hands because we really are looking for almost individual leaves rather than chunks of the Brussels sprouts. And if you hit any ends that maybe you combined in there, go ahead and just pull them out. We don't want any like very hard round ends. You can just kind of tease them with your fingers, and they usually break apart really, really easily. And you don't have to be incredibly meticulous. I love it because I love those little, when you roast the Brussels sprouts, I love those little browned bits of the leaves. So if you don't want to be meticulous, you don't have to, but I promise a little extra effort is worth it. Great. And once you have then an entire pan full of beautifully shaved leaves, then you can go ahead and smash 2 cloves of garlic and peel it. Then you're going to take 2 cloves of garlic and smash them. And how you do that is you use your chef knife and you put it on the garlic and just kind of give it a press. And it actually helps break up the garlic and it makes it so much easier to peel as well. And then from here, you're just gonna give it a quick, rough chop. We don't need it to be diced. It's more just for aromatics and taste. And go ahead and just sprinkle that on the Brussels sprouts. Then we are going to put a nice hefty glug of olive oil on the Brussels sprouts. And let me take a minute and talk about olive oil. Olive oil is something that we probably all have in our kitchen, but olive oil can be as nuanced as, say, like wine is. A good olive oil is worth its weight in gold. You don't have to get the most expensive, but there are a few things that you can look for when you are getting an olive oil. The first thing is the color. You really want a beautiful golden color. That means that it's not super, super extra virgin, that it still has some of the olive in it. It gives it a warmer flavor, a spicier flavor, and it's really great when you're cooking with vegetables. Also, I got this brand at World Market. It was about $10, $15 price point. It's called Frantoia. It is my favorite olive oil that you can get. And like I said, you just put a nice hefty glug of olive oil on there. It's about 2 tablespoons. And then sprinkle with salt and pepper. Once again, maybe about somewhere between a teaspoon and a tablespoon of salt and just a few pinches of black pepper. And then just go ahead and kind of make sure all of your Brussels sprouts get some oil and spices on them, and then return them to a nice flat surface. And your oven should already be hot from the Wellingtons, so all you need to do is raise it another 25 degrees to 425 and go ahead and put them in the oven. Now we're going to check on the Brussels sprouts. They've been in the oven for about 10 minutes at 425, and as you can see, they are starting to get crispy and brown. The garlic is also really amazing smelling. So we're just gonna give them a quick stir. Obviously, it's going to brown more on the sides first, so go ahead and push them toward the center and push the center ones back out to the sides so that they cooked evenly. And then you want to get a nice even layer again. And we're going to pop them back in for another 8 minutes or so, but really make sure that you're keeping an eye on them because we don't want any burnt Brussels sprout leaves. See you in 8 minutes. After the Brussels sprouts have been put in for about another 8 minutes, you can go ahead and check them. And they should be this roasty, toasty, beautiful brown color. Once we've pulled the Brussels sprouts out of the oven, it's time for plating them up. They're this beautiful golden brown color. And I know you're smelling those 2 cloves of garlic. Garlic is great for your immune system. And let's be honest, if we're just cooking for our household, it doesn't matter how your breath smells. Enjoy your garlic. Now's the time. It's already beautiful. You could actually just serve it like this, but we're gonna elevate it a little bit because we're eating Wellington and it's a holiday meal. So what you'll need is your lemon. You're gonna give it a quick squeeze of your lemon, not too much because we are gonna put balsamic vinegar on it. A little glug of balsamic. That adds a little bit of sweetness and a little more acidity that helps break up the bitterness of the Brussels sprouts. And then the fanciest part of all you have to do is take your Parmesan cheese and a vegetable peeler. And you're just going to peel and shave these beautiful curls of Parmesan on to your Brussels sprouts. And I tell you what, this is restaurant quality stuff. A little shave of Parmesan in these nice big chunks just make it beautifully elevated, and it really makes a very special side dish. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back. Now it's time to take our Wellingtons out of the oven. Oh my goodness, this looks so amazing. Here's our beef, looking golden and toasty. And our vegetable looking equally golden and toasty. Now we're ready to plate our Wellingtons. And if you've been with me for any of the rest of this season, you know that now is time to play the aesthetic game. So plating things are often just as important as anything else. So we eat with our eyes first. Make it look beautiful. For tonight's sake, I'm going to combine both vegetable Wellington and beef Wellington on one. But you certainly can get your family involved and plate them up separately. What I like to do if I'm serving it is I will take some of the remaining parsley and tear it, giving it a beautiful garnish on top. And maybe if you're feeling really fancy, you can tuck in some parsley here and there. It's the holidays, you're with your family, have fun with it. You can also take some thyme and put that on top as well. And there you have it, holiday beef and vegetable Wellington. And our Wellingtons are complete. Thank you again for joining me today, and I hope that you had a lot of fun learning about puff pastry and wrapping things and garnishing beautiful platters. Once again, from Coca's Kitchen to yours, we wish you a happy, healthy, and safe holiday. And also that your sangria is as empty as mine. Have a great night.